This is Just Listen, hosted by George. Today is September the 8th, 2025. Welcome to the podcast. Today, I want to talk about the U.S. federal government policy on states versus the federal government actions, why the current federal policies are important to voters, and why the mainstream media soundbites are potentially dangerous for the country. So, to have a conversation about this, I believe that you would start with the constitutional framework. Now, what I'm talking about is federal versus the states. And as you know, currently this has become very important because there is a new administration in who is redefining how we address some of these issues. So let's look at the constitutional authority. So there is the Supremacy Clause. Article 6 of the Constitution establishes that federal law is the supreme law of the land. So when a state law conflicts directly with a valid federal law, the federal law prevails due to the doctrine of preemption. Okay, so that was a mouthful. So if there's two laws, then the federal law. So no one has a problem with that. And if they did, they would have to amend the Constitution. 10th Amendment. The final amendment in the Bill of Rights reserves powers not delegated to the federal government to the states or the people. Historically, this has been the basis for arguments supporting states' rights and limiting federal overreach. So, these laws could be, and this is important to blend it, it's just different people. The same issues that occur keep coming up, and they are in a cycle. So here's an example. The death penalty would be one under that one, prostitution and gambling. So growing up, I saw these as big issues between the federal government and the states, right? So death penalty isn't really on the radar right now, but it used to be. And prostitution, as you know, that in Nevada, it's been legal there for since the 50s probably, and gambling too. So the Constitution doesn't specifically say that you can't do these things. There's no federal law basically saying that. The one that would be the exception, which I'll go into more detail about later on, is the federal government law saying that you cannot smoke marijuana. Oh, okay. So, how is this relevant to what we're talking about now? So, there currently is federal preemption debates. So, there was a federal law that was passed. In 2025, in August, analysis of the American Bar Association highlight tensions over regulating emerging technologies. While 20 states have enacted their own data privacy laws, congressional attempts to pass a comprehensive federal law, such as the American Privacy Act in 2024, have failed. Now, that's a good example because that would highlight all of this AI stuff and regulating and stuff now, because there has been a fight over creating chat rooms with AI, people, private citizens having relationships with AI folks, etc. So currently we are letting the states kind of regulate themselves, and also under this type of deal, there is confusion if there's court cases. All right, next one is Supreme Court limitations on agencies. So a 2025 Supreme Court decision, which was the City and County of San Francisco versus the EPA, limited the EPA's authority under the Clean Water Act. The court ruled that the EPA must specify the steps jurisdictions must take to meet water quality standards rather than imposing broad end result requirements. So the states won on this one because the Supreme Court said, "Hey, we can't just have these broad laws for clean water in this example." Now that's important because the states got to assert themselves, and regulations equals money. Money being the fact that if you don't do what they say, you get fined, or to change the standards would cost you a lot of money. All right, so the Constitution grants the federal government the power to regulate foreign commerce and naturalization. However, states continue to challenge this authority by attempting to increase their own border control or by passing sanctuary policies that do not fully enforce federal immigration law. So here is really where the action is between the states and the federal government. So when the president took office in January, these two things have been on the news, and we have to understand that as the executive, the president has the authority to do these things, and no matter which side you're on, the other can push back a little bit. The problem still is, and you've heard some of my other podcasts, when it is reported, excuse me, the media soundbite is very important. Why? Because it gets people fired up about the issue without having all of the details. Can the president do the things that he's talking about with trade in this one and the sanctuary cities under the immigration law? And the executive or president can do this. And like reported in several other podcasts, the states are pushing back when, in my view, this is an opinion, they don't have the legal authority to do that because the executive or president can say this is an issue and it's our national security. Now, whether you agree with that or not, this is the discussion. So think about the fact of what our perception is on immigration as we see it now. For example, we see that there are a lot of criminals in the country. And so as a result of that, the president says, well, we need to crack down. Also, we can bring in the National Guard and say the cities are dangerous. Based on constitutional authority, the president specifically has that power over the National Guard. No matter what you're hearing from the mainstream media, any president can do that. So that is something to think about. But the soundbite is saying that it's dangerous, they're being invaded. They have strict rules on what the National Guard can do. And remember something, in this case, the National Guard are a part of that state. So it's people who live and work there, and they have their own families. So the soundbite of they are coming in and they're taking over, and uh, what's the term? They're being invaded. They're like invading and stuff like that. It's just not true, and it's very dangerous for the country, for the media to report it like that, and also elected officials. The other thing to talk about are these mandates for shots, which I wasn't really I never really thought about that as a problem. I thought that if you wanted to get the shot, you could, or if you didn't want to, everyone has to decide where they're at with this. So the most important thing is to have the shots available. And that's the most important thing. Have the shots available. And then parents have to decide. Now, this one is something that keeps coming up because currently there's a lot of blowback from the Health and Human Services Secretary and autism and some other things with the shots. So that would be a whole podcast by itself. But the essence of it is mandates for shots, and Florida is going to be the first state that doesn't mandate shots. Everyone has to decide how that affects them. And like I was saying earlier, the key item is make them available. So the health departments in the federal government, the federal policy is they're not mandatory. They're not taking them away and they won't be available. But this is another example of the mainstream media with the soundbite saying or implying that through the soundbite that they won't be available. They will be available. It's just not mandatory for parents if parents are thinking that it could harm their children. And why don't we also, with this and all of these, look at personal responsibility of American citizens? So if parents are saying that they don't want to do something and the state that you're in agrees based on the officials that you have elected, then the states win. But in this case alone, the federal government wants to change the policy so that other people in other states where it's mandated that they get the shots, they have the legal authority not to do it. So it works both ways there. And in general, with the states versus federal government, it is very important for citizens to be able to weigh in when it is appropriate. It's also important whoever is telling the story, meaning the mainstream media, they have to present a little bit of background so that people understand that the federal government actually has legal authority and that they, meaning the federal government, can assert this on the states. What do you think? And please pass on my podcast to other people. And this is Just Listen, hosted by George. Let me know what you think.